Hello, my name is Meysam Tahmasebi, CISSP, Doctorate Fellow of Cybersecurity and lecturer of this CISSP training bootcamp. Knowledge is the lamp by which we read the past, the torch guiding us to understand the present, and the light that illuminates the future. I'm honored that you have decided to spend your precious time with me today. Welcome to CISSP Domain 2. We are going to start focusing on asset security section. Basically, it's all about protecting the asset that matters most to you, like physical property, digital assets, and intellectual property. We will cover all the important topics like how to identify and classify your assets, how to manage them effectively, and what kind of security controls you need to have in place. We will talk about information handling and privacy protection, which are decisive part of any good security plan. By the time you're done, you will have much better idea of why asset security is so important and what you can do to keep your valuable assets safe and sound. This chapter is perfect not only for you security professionals, but also for senior management and executives who wants to learn more about asset security and how it impacts the entire ecosystem. Let's begin our journey with the first objective, which is to identify and classify information and assets. Data classification involves categorizing data based on its sensitivity and criticality. You guys are aware of data classification scheme in government establishment, which are top secret, confidential, etc., etc. We usually deal with a different scheme to classification, but the idea behind it is the same. By classifying data into different levels, such as public, internal, confidential, or sensitive, you can apply suitable controls and implement restrictions to safeguard them. Remember that data classification makes sure that sensitive data is adequately protected, and it reduces the risk of unauthorized access and potential data breach. The key word here is adequate. You don't want to leave anything valuable unprotected, but at the same time, you are cognizant of overprotecting them. Remember the CIA triad. Under protection puts confidentiality and sometimes integrity at risk, and over protection almost always put availability in jeopardy. Asset classification involves identifying and categorizing tangible and intangible assets. These assets may include hardware, software, intellectual property, physical facilities, and more. Classifying asset allows you to arrange protection efforts based on their significance and impact on the business operations. By understanding the value and importance of each asset, we can put proper security measures to mitigate risks and protect critical resources effectively. One of the first things you need to do to keep your assets safe is to figure out what those assets are. This means identifying and classifying them based on how valuable, sensitive, and critical they are. Now, when we talk about asset, we are not just talking about physical stuff like building and equipment. We're also talking about digital assets like data and application, and even intellectual assets like patent and trademarks. So, how do you identify and classify all of these different types of assets? Well, there are a few ways to do it. One approach is to conduct a comprehensive inventory of everything and categorize it based on its value and sensitivity. Another way is to use data classification schemes to identify different levels of sensitivity and access control. Once you've got all of your assets figured out and classified, of course, it's time to start protecting them. This means implementing processes and controls based on how important each asset is. For example, if you've got some sensitive digital assets, you might need to use encryption, access controls, and monitoring to keep them safe. If you've got some valuable physical asset, you might need to harden your perimeter security, use CCTV, or utilizing access controls. Long story short, figuring out your assets and their importance is a huge part of protection. Once you take care of them, you can start putting the right controls in place to keep everything safe and sound. This objective revolves around defining and implementing guidelines for proper management, storage, and handling of information and assets. When you set a clear requirement, only then you can adequately improve the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of critical resources. There are several items here, so let's take a look at them together one at a time. Information management requirement involves establishing policies and procedures for the entire life cycle of information, from creation and collection to storage, transmission, and disposal. When we properly define handling procedures, you can maintain data integrity, prevent unauthorized access, and comply with relevant regulations and legal requirements. Next is to take care of asset management requirements. Similar to information, assets also require defining handling procedure. This includes everything from IT hardware and software to physical equipment and intellectual property. Establishing asset management requirements enables us to track assets, make sure that they are properly used, and protect them from theft, loss, or misuse. Next is to take care of access control measures. Part of handling information and asset is controlling who can access them and under what circumstances. Implementing robust access control measures guarantees that only authorized personnel can access sensitive data or critical assets. The use of authentication methods or role-based access controls are some typical examples here. Data retention and disposal are essential to determine how long certain data and asset should be retained based on legal, business, and compliance requirements. Keep them for as long as you have to and not more. Once it is time to get rid of them, we must have proper disposal procedures to securely remove data when they are no longer needed. This helps prevent data breaches or unauthorized access to discarded equipment. The last piece of puzzle is the training and awareness. Providing training and raising awareness about the importance of information security and asset management goes a long way for everyone so they understand their responsibilities. As you know, proper handling of information and asset requires the cooperation of all employees. So keep them engaged and informed. Now let's look at the next interesting objective, which is provisioning resources securely. There are three natural areas here. Information and asset ownership involves clearly defining the ownership and accountability of information and assets. It aims to identify who is responsible for creation, use, protection, and disposal of specific information and assets. Assigning ownership helps establishing a clear chain of responsibilities to make sure that the teams are aware of their roles in safeguarding sensitive data and valuable assets. It also helps in enforcing access controls and determining the appropriate handling procedures for different types of information and asset based on their ownership. Asset inventory management is the fundamental for maintaining an up-to-date records of tangible and intangible assets. Tangible assets are pretty much known to all of us, which may include hardware devices, equipment, and physical facilities. The issue is with intangible assets. Since we cannot see and touch them, they are usually overlooked. Intangible assets can be intellectual property, software licenses, and other digital resources. Creating and frequently updating an asset inventory enables us to have a comprehensive overview of the assets, their location, and their status, whether they are active, retired, or in use. Asset management highlights the importance of identifying and assigning value to asset. The need to understand the life cycle of asset as well as methodologies for managing those assets. This includes processes like tagging, secure disposal and reuse, and even residual data handling. Asset management tends to focus on understanding the threats and vulnerabilities and risk associated with the assets. The data lifecycle encompasses stages from creation, collection, processing, storage, usage, sharing, archiving, and eventual disposal of data. Each stage of this life cycle has its unique security considerations. In the creation or collection stage, we must identify the data to be collected, the means of collection, and the initial security measures to be applied. It is essential to only collect what is necessary to limit the potential exposure of sensitive information. This is more relevant to DevOps folks. Just because you can collect it doesn't mean you should. Even if you collect them, but you don't need them, discard them immediately. It is expensive to protect data, so only collect what you need, no more, no less. During the processing stage, data may be transformed, corrected, integrated, and cleaned. This is the point where we start seeing errors or inaccuracies. That's why we put quality control mechanisms and access controls to maintain data integrity. A tip for data scientists is that it is much cheaper to sanitize and normalize the data at this stage. Fixing the errors down the road will cost you exponentially. In the storage and usage phase, what we need is consistent security measures to protect data against unauthorized access or modification. Some common activities are the use of encryption, strong access controls, and regular audits. Sharing data, whether internally or externally, increases the risk of unauthorized access or disclosure. Because of that, we must use secure transmission methods and recipient verification. For sensitive data, de-identification and anonymization techniques may be used to protect individual identities. That's why I suggested not to collect something that you don't need. If you do, and you know it's sensitive data, use techniques like tokenization to reduce the damage of disclosure. The archiving stage is often overlooked, but it is just as vital. Data archiving needs to make sure that the data remains intact and available for future use. I can't stress enough that archive should comply with retention policies and other protection requirements. What does it mean in plain English? The archive should have the same level of security and protection as the original data. The disposal of data is a last critical step, and also another item that is often overlooked. We should use proper data disposal methods to be sure that the data cannot be reconstructed or retrieved. This includes physical destruction, degaussing, and cryptographic erasure of digital data. That hard disk that you throw out in the garbage bin contains data. Yes, it's broken and it doesn't work, but it will for someone with more expensive tools and strong motivation. All right, now that we've covered the data lifecycle, the next area is the data roles. I gotta admit that they might seem easy to grasp at first, but trust me, there can be some confusions and similarities between them. So let's see if I can break it down and make it simple for you. Data owners are individuals or entities who have the legal rights and control over the data. They are usually senior management or business unit leaders who have the authority to make the decisions about data, such as how it should be classified and protected. I've got bad news for my fellow system administrators. I love you guys because I was a system admin for so many years, but you guys are not data owners. I was shocked when I heard it for the first time, so you're not alone. Bear with me and listen carefully. You will find your spot as custodian soon. Data controllers determine the purpose for which and how the data is processed. They decide why and how the data is being used. The data controller has significant amount of control and responsibility when it comes to personal data. They are usually the ones to determine how the data should be processed and why, and they are expected to make sure that the data is handled in a way that complies with the privacy laws and regulations. So, confusion number one. Data owners and data controllers might look the same, but pay attention to the differences. In a nutshell, a data owner in CISSP context is focused on classification, control, and ownership of the data, while the data controller has responsibilities for how personal data is collected, stored, and processed, particularly in line with data protection laws. Data custodians, also known as data stewards, are typically us, the IT professionals responsible for maintaining the data on a day-to-day basis. Their responsibilities include implementing the controls specified by data owners, ensuring the integrity, confidentiality, and availability of data, performing backups, and restoring data if necessary. Data processors are individuals or entities that process the data on behalf of data controller. They might include third parties like cloud service providers, for example. They don't have decision-making authority over the data, but they are responsible for handling the data as instructed by controller. So pay attention to the relationship between the roles. Data users are individuals or systems that utilize the data in performing their functions. They must follow the rules set forth by the data owner and controller. Data subjects are the individuals whom the data is about. They have the rights regarding their data, like the right to access, control, or delete their data under certain privacy situation. These roles have different responsibilities in managing and protecting the data, and understanding them is fundamental for implementing effective data protection strategies. Data collection is the crucial stage in data lifecycle that requires careful management. It's the point where we aggregate the raw information needed for analysis, decision-making, and future security planning. However, this isn't a simple collection mission. As security professionals, we are tasked with the challenge of ensuring that the data integrity from the start. Consider this: each piece of data we gather must be accurate, complete, and relevant. If there's an error or gap at this stage, it can amplify and cascade throughout the entire life cycle, potentially leading to flawed security decisions. That's why we must apply rigorous validation processes and cross-checks. We also need to be mindful of where the data comes from. The source's reliability can directly impact the data's trustworthiness. Then there is a question of legal and ethical responsibilities. As I just mentioned it briefly a few minutes ago, data collection isn't the Wild West. We operate within the constraint of regulations such as GDPR, HIPAA, or many others. There are so many elements we need to consider, such as privacy rights, data sovereignty, and the use of data. As we gather more and more data, we also have to think about storage and secure transmission. So, in essence, when we talk about managing data collection, it's not just about pulling in as much as data as we can. It's about establishing reliable legal and ethical procedures that preserve data quality and security from the beginning. Data location is a significant factor in data lifecycle simply because it can have profound implications on the way we manage and protect that data. As with other elements of data management, we have to account for this across the spectrum of contexts: technical, regulatory, and even geopolitical. So let's briefly take a look at these three items. From the technical perspective, where the data is stored can impact its accessibility, latency, and security. Whether the data is stored on premises, in cloud environment, or a hybrid setup, each has its own set of considerations. On-premise data centers might provide more controls, but they could limit scalability and accessibility. On the other hand, cloud storage offers flexibility and scalability, but also introduces unique security challenges and dependencies on the providers. Legally, the data location ties closely to data sovereignty, which requires that the data is subject to the laws of the country in which it is collected or processed. Different jurisdictions have different data protection laws, and the location of data can greatly influence how it should be handled, how it should be protected, and how it should be transferred. Finally, from the geopolitical perspective, storing data in certain locations could expose it to additional risks such as government surveillance, potential political instability or security threats associated with a particular region. So, managing data location isn't just a question on where you put your data. It's the strategic decision that impacts the data security, compliance, and operations. Data maintenance is the unsung hero of data lifecycle. It's all too easy to overlook, but without effective data maintenance, even the most accurately gathered and stored data can rapidly lose its value. Maintenance begins with quality control and data hygiene practices. Regular audits are crucial to identifying and rectifying errors or inconsistencies in the data sets. Inaccurate or outdated data can lead to incorrect analysis and decision making, which in a security context can be catastrophic. Next, there is data enrichment, which is about maximizing the value of data. It could involve techniques like integration, where we merge data from different sources, or data augmentation, where we add new information to the existing records to enhance their usability or relevance. And let's not forget about data archiving and purging. Not all data is timeless, and some become less relevant or even obsolete as time goes by. By archiving and purging such data, we can optimize storage and cost and maintain the efficiency of data retrieval processes. Maintenance also involves ensuring that the data backups are performed regularly and efficiently to safeguard against data loss and prevention. This includes testing, restoration processes to make sure that they work effectively when needed. Finally, data security is a continuous process and therefore an integral part of data maintenance. Regular vulnerability assessments, patch management, and updates to access controls are essential to protect the data from evolving threats. So, in essence, the data maintenance isn't a one-time task, but an ongoing commitment to ensure that the data's relevance, accuracy, usability, and security. Data retention is the practice of determining how long data should be stored based on the factors like relevance, legal requirement, and storage capabilities. A well-designed data retention policy defines the criteria and timelines for the data archiving, retention, and deletion. Regulatory compliance often drives the retention timelines. Laws such as GDPR, HIPAA, or Sarbanes-Oxley set specific periods for how long certain types of data must be kept. However, data shouldn't be retained indefinitely. Holding on to data longer than necessary increases storage costs and potential liabilities in case of data breach. Therefore, it's important to periodically review and update retention policies to reflect changes in data relevance, regulatory requirements, and storage capacities. Remember, efficient data retention practices strike a balance between regulatory compliance, operations requirement, and storage optimization. Data remanence refers to the data that persists after deletion or erasure attempt. This poses a security risk as such residual data can be recovered by the malicious actors. Traditional deletion or formatting often doesn't erase the data. It just deletes the reference to it. Data sanitization techniques help mitigate this risk. It includes cryptographic erasure, which makes the data unreadable without encryption keys, overwriting, which replaces existing data with random information, and physical destruction, which involves the complete destruction of the storage medium. Choosing the right method depends on the specific context. In essence, managing data remanence is vital in ensuring data marked for deletion cannot be recovered, preserving data security throughout the data lifecycle. Data destruction is the process of completely eliminating the data from storage medium to make sure that it cannot be retrieved or reconstructed. This is critical final step in data lifecycle, especially for sensitive data to prevent unauthorized access or data breaches. Data destruction techniques range from overwriting, which replaces existing data with random, meaningless information, to degaussing, which uses a magnetic field to disrupt stored data on magnetic media. Physical destruction like shredding or incineration is another method, but it eliminates the possibility of reusing the storage medium. We need to select a method appropriate for the data sensitivity and storage type and verify the effectiveness of destruction. As you know, documentation or certification of destruction can provide evidence of compliance with data privacy regulations, and you might need it for audit purposes. Managing asset retention, especially in the context of end of life and end of support, is a delicate balance act in information security. Both these terms refer to stages where the manufacturer stops selling, updating, or providing support for a particular product. The implications for us as security professionals are significant and multidimensional. At the technical level, end of life and end of support means that no more security patches, updates, or technical assistance will be provided for the product. Using such assets post end of life and end of support can expose our systems to vulnerabilities that won't be patched, especially leaving a backdoor open for threat actors. On the other hand, replacing these assets isn't always straightforward. There may be dependencies, compatibility issues, or costs to consider, not to mention the potential disruption during the transition phase. Because of that, planning for end of life and end of support should be proactive. We need to monitor for manufacturer's notifications, assess the risk and cost, and plan the transition for the upgrade path ahead of time. This could involve finding alternative products, migrating to a newer version, or even creating custom patches if the risk of continuing to use the asset is deemed acceptable. Now, let's not forget about the disposal of the assets reaching end of life or end of support. We have to make sure that sensitive data is effectively removed and that disposal complies with the environmental regulations. So in short, appropriate asset retention involves extensive planning, effective risk management, and careful execution. It's a life cycle within the life cycle, if you will. As security professionals, our job isn't only to keep the data safe. We also have to make sure that the data is guarded in a way that matches the many different legal rules and regulations and contracts we have. These obligations can range from industry-specific regulations like HIPAA in healthcare or PCI DSS for payment card industry, or data protection laws such as GDPR in Europe or CCPA here in California. They outline specific security controls that we must implement, as well as the processes we need to have in place to demonstrate compliance. However, determining the right data security controls and compliance requirement isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. It requires a deep understanding of the data we are protecting, the context in which it's used, the threats we are facing, and the legal and regulatory landscape we are operating in. It's a balancing act between the risk, compliance, and operations efficiency. So as we go through the following subcategories, let's keep in mind that each one is a piece of a complex puzzle that we are trying to solve. It's not just about ticking boxes, but building a comprehensive, compliant, and effective security program that aligns with the business objectives. When we are setting data security controls, it's vital to consider the various states that data can exist in, namely data at rest, data in transit, and data in use. Data at rest is stored data, whether it's on the hard drive, backup tape, or in a cloud storage environment. This is stationary data, and it is susceptible to unauthorized access or theft. So controls like encryption, strong access controls, and physical security measures are fundamental in this case. Data in transit, on the other hand, refers to the data being transferred between locations, like across the network or to and from the cloud. Protecting data in transit is crucial to preventing interception and any form of in-the-middle attacks. We usually employ techniques like Transport Layer Protocol or TLS and IPsec to encrypt this type while it is on the move. Data in use is the data actively being processed or accessed. This state is often the hardest to secure, and traditional security controls like encryption may have limitations when data needs to be in readable state for processing. This is where advanced controls like secure enclaves, zero trust models, and real-time threat detection comes into play. Let's briefly take a look at the few of these methods. One approach to the issue is in-process encryption, also known as memory encryption, where data is encrypted while it's being processed. Intel Software Card Extension, or SGX for short, is a well-known example of this technology. SGX allows applications to create protected enclaves in memory where data can be processed securely without exposure to the rest of the system. Homomorphic encryption, or HA, allows computation to be carried out on encrypted data, producing an encrypted result. Once decrypted, this result matches the result of the operations performed on the plain text. This allows data to remain encrypted while in use. Secure multi-part computation, or SMPC, is an encrypting protocol that allows multiple parties to perform computation on encrypted data without revealing their input to the others. This can be useful in scenarios where sensitive data needs to be processed across different parties. Zero knowledge proofs, or ZKP, is a cryptographic protocol that allows one party to prove to another that they know the decrypted value without conveying any information apart from the fact that they know the value. ZKP can be used to verify transactions or operations on sensitive data without revealing the data itself. As you know, the key point about data in use encryption is fundamental re-architecture. They are also heavy in computational demands, especially my favorite, the fully homomorphic encryption or FHE, and maybe that's why it is not widely adopted yet, even though the risk of data leakage is relatively high. So back to the main topic about the three states. As you can see, each one presents unique security challenges requiring tailored controls. And remember, compliance requirements often mandate specific protection for data in different states. We need to align our controls with these mandates simply because it's all about safeguarding the data regardless of its state. Scoping and tailoring is an essential part of determining security controls and compliance requirements. It's about adapting the generic guidelines and standards to our specific context. Scoping involves defining the boundaries for our systems and identifying the data, processes, and assets that need to be protected. This could mean segmenting networks to isolate sensitive systems, determining which system types are subject to specific regulations, or identifying which systems are within the specific standards like PCI DSS. By accurately defining our scope, we can make sure that our security efforts are targeted and relevant without wasting resources on out-of-scope areas. Tailoring, on the other hand, is about modifying control sets to align with specific needs. Security controls aren't one size fits all. What works for one business might not work for another. Tailoring might involve adding in new controls to address the unique risks, modifying existing controls to better fit our operational environment, or even skipping certain controls that aren't relevant to us or it's not necessary in our context. But let's remember that tailoring isn't a free pass to minimize security efforts. Any modification to baseline controls should be justified by a thorough risk assessment, and we need to make sure that we are still meeting all of our regulatory and compliance obligations. At the end of the day, scoping and tailoring is about building a security program that is effective, efficient, compliant, and fitted to our unique needs and circumstances. Standard selections is about choosing the right security frameworks or standards to guide our security efforts. There is no shortage of standards out there, from ISO 27001 to NIST Cybersecurity Framework, COBIT, or PCI DSS. Each provides a structured approach to manage cybersecurity risks. The selection of standards can depend on various factors. Industry or regulatory requirements usually dictates the use of certain standards. For example, PCI DSS is mandatory for those handling card payments. On the other hand, others in various sectors worldwide commonly adopt ISO 27001 due to the comprehensive nature and international recognition. The standard selection should align with our business objective and risk appetite, and should be able to support the complexity and scale of our operations. It's not just about the compliance, but about improving the security posture and resilience. Because of that, selecting the right standard is crucial in shaping our security controls and driving our overall cybersecurity strategy. When we talk about data protection methods, we are really discussing the tools and techniques we can employ to safeguard our data. Let's briefly talk about a few must-have items. Digital right management, or DRM, is essentially a way to control access to copyrighted material. Think of it like a digital lock on files, restricting its use to only authorized users. DRM can limit what users can do with data, such as preventing copying, printing, sharing, adding an external layer of control over sensitive documents. Data leakage prevention, or DLP solutions, are more about monitoring and preventing data breaches or leakage. DLP tools can track sensitive data as it moves across the network and systems, detect suspicious activities, and stop data transfers that violate preset policies. It's like a vigilant watchdog continuously on the lookout for potential data leak. A cloud access security broker, or CASB, is a newer player in the field, acting as a gatekeeper between the on-premise solutions and cloud providers. CASB can enforce security policies across multiple cloud services, providing visibility, threat protection, and compliance for data in the cloud. Each of these methods and tools has its strength, but none is a standalone solution. Always remember the defense in depth. It's about integrating these tools into a holistic security strategy where they can work in harmony to secure data across its entire lifecycle. It's clear that this area of knowledge asset security is vast, multi-layered, and dynamic. As security professionals, our ability to manage and protect assets effectively from data collection through destruction is fundamental to security posture. We have to consider the different states data can exist in, the various regulations and standards, the vast array of threats, and of course, wide range of protection methods available to us. Our work isn't just about ticking off boxes on the compliance checklist. It's about understanding the intricacies of data lifecycle, tailoring security controls to our unique context, and ultimately creating a robust and resilient security infrastructure. As we navigate the ever-evolving landscape of cybersecurity, let's remember that asset security isn't a destination, but an ongoing journey. Whether it's selecting the appropriate standards or deploying the cutting-edge data protection methods, our work plays a critical role in safeguarding our most valuable assets. My final word of advice is to continue to evolve, adapt, and secure in this constantly fluid journey of asset security. This concludes executive summary of CISSP Domain 2 Asset Security. As you can see, there is a lot to cover, and just enumerating keywords require an hour-long lecture. My name is Meysam Tahmasebi, and I want you to take these lessons and let them be stepping stone towards achieving your dreams. The future is not something you wait. It's something you create. The best is yet to come. Thanks for listening.